I am deeply honoured to address you at the 99th ADC and my second as your President. I acknowledge the Minister's acknowledgement of the cervical smear controversy, and I acknowledge also his swift action, and I would hope that any inquiry would also be swift and effect change for what President Robinson, a former president, would have said, Mana na hÉireann. We deserve better, we deserve justice, and we deserve equality. It has been a busy year and promises to be even busier on the industrial relations front, as we await the report of the Public Service Pay Commission and move towards our centenary, in which you, our members, will participate in the year-long calendar of celebrations. Over my 2-year term in office, I have represented you to the best of my ability. I have to say, my role is not for the faint-hearted, as even with my own inevitable confidence and confident nature, I have been tested to the tips of my fingers and toes. The steeliest of individuals would despair, yet I've always maintained my professional composure and forged on, despite what I would say as the intransigent, indifferent, and downright beleaguering and belittling attitudes of our employer, that, might add, was sometimes overtly demonstrated, but more often than not was covert. Martin Luther King once said, "I am thankful for all those difficult people I have met in my life, as they have shown me who I do not want to be." I know now what Dr. King was talking about, as I know for certain who I do not want to be. So where will I begin? As an educationalist and armed with feedback from last year's ADC, where I know you all endured a long speech from me. However, unlike my employer, I've taken on board the feedback, and my address, I hope, will adhere to the KISS principle, which is to keep it short, simple, sweet, and to the point, maybe saccharine at times, whilst I get my message across. So at the outset, there are 2 events that I want to acknowledge before I get into the nitty-gritty. And those 2 events are: we have a new leader at the helm. She probably doesn't like the picture. Phil Hay, who has taken over the mantle at a time of transitional change in our health service. On behalf of all of you, I congratulate and I welcome Phil to this, her first ADC as General Secretary, whom I will add is a very safe pair of hands, not to mention a very capable and experienced negotiator. She is wished every success in this challenging role, but as she herself would say, "Tá sé mar honor chun anajacht, altre agus na knavshaska na hÉireann." It's an honour for her to represent and be there for you as the Nurses and Midwives of Ireland. Her appointment as General Secretary to a predominantly female profession, I am sorry, gentlemen, but 91% of us are female, in a year that celebrates the centenary of women voting, is timely in the wake of gender pay gaps and barriers faced by female workforce in general. Tomorrow marks International Day of the Midwife, which was first celebrated on May 5th, 1991, and has since been observed in over 50 nations around the world. The idea of having a day to recognise and honour midwives came out of the 1987 International Confederation of the Midwives Conference in the Netherlands. Therefore, the INMO, in solidarity, give recognition to the contribution that the midwives of Ireland and all around the world have made as life partners to mothers, families, along the birthing journey. Indeed, it is this sort of partnership in healthcare that is the true goal which we strive to achieve. However, and I know the Minister mentioned the maternity strategy, to ensure that the goal is enabled safely, it is critical, and I am looking at you again, Minister, that the National Maternity Strategy is implemented in full, it is funded, so that we ensure a 1 midwife to 29.5 births ratio. This year, Ireland and Northern Ireland celebrate the centenary of the Midwives Act of Ireland 1918, which is acknowledged at our centenary stall in the foyer. I want to inform you that we have been active with our RCM colleagues in the north of Ireland, and I would like to acknowledge the presence of Breda Hughes, their General Secretary, here today. The commemoration It is important that we commemorate this landmark legislation 100 years later. As I introduced our new General Secretary earlier, nursing lies centrally to everything that she values. Her watchwords are, as they are on that slide, Dochas, which is hope, and most importantly, courage, which is Mishnach, and I don't lack it. To pursue what nurses and midwives truly deserve, that is, to once and for all set fair and equal pay for our predominantly female profession. I will preface this address by saying, as much as I love the music of the rock band U2, I do not intend to be referencing the words of the song, I Still Haven't Found What I Am Looking For, as I hope that all parties, the HSE, the Department of Health and the Commission members have the courage or the Mishnach to confirm that the recruitment and retention issues in nursing and midwifery will not be corrected without that simple three-lettered word which we saw visualised at the very beginning, called pay. Nurses and midwives are indeed doing it for themselves. Lig doing. Let's face it, if this union doesn't, no one else will. We have had our critics. For example, the trolley watch, the Taoiseach, unfair metrics. To those I say this, to criticise is to time waste when you could be doing something meaningful about the figures. Nurses and midwives don't time waste. It's not possible because they don't have the time. Our conference theme this year, as the Minister quite rightly alluded to, is Innovation in Practice, Nurses and Midwives Leading the Way. As you can see up there, I've taken inspiration from Barack Obama. There are key words in that. And again, if we wait for some other person or some other time, it's the key glitch within the statement that I'm making. Nurses at this conference showcased in their presentations the achievements in practice, the indisputable evidence that you, Minister, so often refer to. It's the positive impact that can only serve to enhance the patient's journey. Innovation in practice, indeed it is the art and science of nursing. As I refer to it, and it's not the hairspray, but it's the L'Oreal factor. It is the interaction of the art and science of nursing, the care provision that sets us apart from other professions. Caring is at the heart and at the very essence of what nurses and midwives do. Yet caring is an undervalued term. Why? Caring is a catch-all, unquantifiable term which has common utility in society and causes confusion. Yet, as I have said, nursing care is a central ideal and a construct of nursing and midwifery, and one that I can argue is more than just caring about. It is a distinct professional response or an action to an individual's needs, and for whom the consequences can be catastrophic amid the current climate of deprofessionalisation if not carried out by a real nurse or midwife. I sound now like Nurse Gilhooly from Kilnascully. Only, and I reiterate, only, and I will repeat it again, a nurse or a midwife can give nursing care, as they are the regulated professional who has the relevant holistic skills, knowledge, competence and attitude to do so. It is clear from the Medical and Surgical Task Force findings that many of the problems associated with providing quality nursing care, which demonstrates that care resulting in positive or negative patient outcomes, stems from organisational issues, such as lack of time, poor skill mix, and disempowerment on the part of the nurse or midwife. All of these can, and often do, make you as practitioners war-weary, and almost like as if you have neither the energy, the motivation, nor any of the inclination left to provide what the patient needs. The evaluation report of the pilot implementation of the Framework for Safe Nurses, Staffing and Skill Mix, launched on April 16th last, revealed that higher scores on emotional exhaustion and depersonalisation subscales indicate negative outcomes. Higher scores on the personal accomplishment subscales indicate better outcomes. To put it simply, exhausted nurses and midwives have nothing left to give. And Taoiseach, if you are listening, this is particularly for you, who recognise that you always acknowledge those who get up early. Well, nurses and midwives get up early, they contribute to the economy, but I will also add, they go home very late with very little to show for it. And so, what has this union done? We as a union have adhered to process over the last number of years, and more recently we have embarked upon a journey that seeks to unveil and set the record straight on the professional excellence that nurses and midwives provide, and indeed which was debated by Executive Council's Emergency Motion 1. Therefore, our argument is this, and it is very simple, and it's harping back to the L'Oreal factory again. We are worth it. I couldn't let it slip as an educationalist. Active learning theory has been and will continue to be utilised throughout my speech today. Why? It espouses to the following old Chinese proverb: what we hear, we forget. What we see, we remember. And what we do, we understand. In fact, we remember 80% of what we see. The word pay was visualised and will be visualised again as I address the conference, as this is the only solution to the recruitment and retention crisis. Fact: nurses and midwives are at the same qualification level of all other allied healthcare professionals in the Irish Public Health Service. Yet, whilst we have parity of academic esteem, we do not have parity when it comes to pay and conditions. I have no qualms about saying this, and I am an academic at heart, and as Liam used to say, I cannot understand why you would be a pragmatic academic because he'd never met one. It has its plaudits and its esteem. However, on its own, it does not and will not pay the bills. Indeed, this very point was made in Dáil Éireann as recently as April 25th, which you participated in, Minister, the debate of the private member's bill, which was forwarded on recruitment and retention and received all party support, with one TD stating the following: it's the Colleen Mike one. Nice morals don't cut it. Everything has been tried except pay. I concur, as recognising and valuing our professional expertise on par with all other professionals does and will. From the perspective of the nurse or midwife, it is not good enough that we continuously rely upon the acts of faith, hope and charity for parity recognition. Yet, this is all despite equal pay for equal work being a basic right since the 1957 Treaty of Rome. In January, I attended a symposium in Ivy House, hosted jointly by the Government Departments of Business, Enterprise and Innovation and the Government Department of Justice and Equality, on addressing Ireland's gender pay gap, which stands at a staggering 13.6%. At that symposium, Andy Clone, the Deputy Head of the European Commission, brought this statistic to life when he referred to November 3rd as Equal Pay Day. And wait for it, this is the day when all women in Ireland stop earning every single year. This impacts on nurses and midwives, who are predominantly female, yet during the recessionary years they were subjected to a moratorium, sustained between 15 and 39% in pay cuts, were made to pay back, wait for it, 78 hours, 2 weeks of work every year, free gratis, work shifts, and have no real work-life balance. As one Dáil deputy on April 25th said, "Who would want to be a nurse or a midwife?" As if that wasn't bad enough, to add insult to injury, to have a further scenario where nurses and midwives are paid between 15 and 20% less than all other professionals, nurses, and allied healthcare professionals who require identical entry qualifications and have a shorter working week, sometimes as short as 35 hours, in my humble opinion, is nothing short of a national disgrace. Peter Drucker, the renowned management theorist, held the belief that the best way to predict the future is to create it. All I can say is the solutions have been created, warts and all. I am not suggesting in any way that they are the panacea to all ills. However, it is when they are combined and, more importantly, funded and implemented that the greatest good will be experienced by our ailing health service that will stem its deteriorating condition. Now, many of ye are nurse prescribers. I am not, but I have a little prescription to give out today. So in prescribing this treatment, Minister, you need to take the prescription to the dispensing pharmacist, the Minister for Finance, Paschal Donoghue. On that prescription will be written full implementation of the Sláinte Care Report, full implementation of the Capacity Review Report, and the full implementation and funding of the National Nursing and Midwifery Workforce Plan agreed by all of ye in March of 2017, which, I will add, must be extended for a 5-year period, and of course, full implementation of the Public Service Pay Commission, who are finalising Module 1 on that report as we speak, that they recognise that recruitment and retention issues in nursing and midwifery is indeed a pay issue. What I haven't on the prescription is the elephant in the room. It's that additional little thing that sometimes you're given under the counter, and that is Brexit. Must be considered and acknowledged. Make no mistake, soft or hard border, the UK will intensively recruit our Irish nurses. Why? They offer better packages. We are their closest neighbour. We are their most accessible English-speaking neighbour. And we have a ready-made pool of recognised global excellence in nursing and midwifery. This union, with the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding with our colleagues in the Royal College of Midwives in London in January 22nd of this year, set in process an agreement of mutual cooperation as opposed to competition. Therefore, Brexit poses not just economic threats, but also human resource shocks on a potentially unprecedented nature, and indeed we are living it at the moment. Minister, in my excellence of having done economics and sociology as a degree, we are a small, open economy, and we are certainly extremely vulnerable. Let me take you now on a brief tour of each of Minister Donoghue's prescriptions and prescribed treatments. Sláinte Care, yesterday, we had Ms Roisin Shortall, Social Democrat TD, who addressed this conference. Ms Shortall, as she told us, was chair of the Dáil Committee on the Future of Healthcare. I think it was no coincidence that the task to produce the final report was allocated to a woman. And the job got done. This union was one of 160 submissions, as Roisin told us yesterday, received by the cross-party, as you have quite rightly stated today, Minister, Oireachtas Committee, and I, as your President, had the honour of further strengthening our written submission with an oral presentation to that select Dáil Committee. Sláinte Care is what I refer to as the Health Service Super Plan. You have indeed, Minister, today said it is the direction of travel that makes surety out of where health services are going, and I welcome that. The cross-party agreement aims to ensure that everybody in Ireland has access to affordable, universal, single-tiered healthcare in which patients are treated promptly on a basis of need rather than on ability to pay. The sting in the tail. I was nice to him at the beginning. Yet on September 11th, 2017, our government appeared to require prompting some 4 months after the report's publication in May 2017. A Dáil question was raised on the issue of the implementation of the report, and the Minister's response was, I quote, "I am committed to making tangible and sustainable improvements in our health services," and I know he is. And I have received approval to move ahead with the establishment of the Sláinte Care Programme Office. This office will be tasked with implementing a programme of reform as agreed by the Government arising from the Sláinte Care report. It will be led by a senior executive and the appropriate experience and skill set. I expect the recruitment process to commence very shortly, and recruitment will be by way of open competition. I have a question. I trust that the Sláinte Care Programme Office will not be yet another bureaucratic layer further delaying the implementation of this report, as we are only too well aware that non-implementation will mean more of the following: continued recruitment and retention for nurses and midwives, continued healthcare difficulties and access for our citizens, with spiralling waiting lists and treatments for treatments and diagnostics and surgery, continuing spiralling trolley figures. March 2018 surpassed all. The 12th of March will go down in history as that record day with 714 on trolleys. That is the equivalent of one major teaching hospital in Dublin. As if that wasn't bad enough, April started off 30% higher than April of last year. We will still have continued disjointed integration with, God forgive us, the non-clinical management system within the HSEs hell-bent on their siloed budgeting, with no identified budget for nursing and midwifery, resulting in this resource seen as fair game. Dare I continue? That all-important evidence is undeniable, Minister. We must ensure the equitable health of this nation, which is estimated will cost £2.86 billion over the 10 years. I am now calling on this government to commit to this cost, and I am forwarding potentially the forward suggestion that the estimated £3.5 billion proceeds from the sale of the state's 25% shareholding in AIB, which was a mere drop in the ocean to the £21 billion that it was bailed out with, could be used to implement this report in full. It would be nice to think that finally there was some benefit to the citizens of this country from the bank bailouts. So therefore, Minister, when I eye you up, I am saying the reality for the citizens of this country is the clock is ticking on this framework, and please make it a reality for all. I move along to the next point that's up there, and that's the Capacity Review Report. Indeed, this is the Minister's baby. The intention of this review was to take a more comprehensive view of capacity than previous exercises undertaken in Ireland, which predominantly focused on acute bed capacity only. This review is broad and not only examines capacity requirements within the acute hospital facility, but also those that directly impact on demand for hospital services. Capacity and services provided by primary care and the availability of non-acute beds and services in the community, for example, our residential care settings and our home care, which were debated by you, the delegates, throughout our 3 days of conference. This union has also made its evidence-based practice and welcomes the bed increases projected, as you referred to today. You already mentioned the ones for without the reform of the health service, 2,600, and you also alluded to the 4,500 for the community. I will also refer to the 190 additional adult critical care beds and also the 13,000 residential older person services, and I want you all to hold to that figure. You did wonder who it was who decided to take all the beds away. I'll answer the question, Professor Drum. Surely this level of capacity acknowledges that major, radical and significant expansion of all services is required and must include the nursing and midwifery workforce. In short, a key immediate requirement, and you acknowledged it today, is the increase in staffing capacity, in particular of nursing and midwifery, which this union has called for an increase of 25%. However, there is that proverbial, not the fly on the wall, which I'd love to be at times, but the fly in the ointment is the failure to recruit nurses and midwives, despite, which I might add, the best efforts of the HSE's National Recruitment Group. And given that we're in Cork, and given that I am a 60s baby, and I would have been quite interested, my mother would have always watched Hall's Pictorial Weekly, there were two gentlemen, Maya and Cha, who were always on Hall's Pictorial Weekly, and one used to say to the other, "Get on with it." And this is fact, not fake, that I'm going to get on with. Tony, our Industrial Relations Director, already alluded to it. St Finbarr's 160-bedded community hospital in Cork is essential to patient flow for both Cork University Hospital and the Mercy. Yet, unbelievably, the HSE in January of this year outlined their plans to cut 16 nursing WTEs on financial grounds. This was despite St Finbarr's already being down 16 WTEs. Minister, best evidence, Aiken et al., and all the other contributors to research have found that for every one extra patient added to a registered nurse workload, it is associated with a 7% increase in deaths. This is not just care compromised. This is care being sacrificed to a cost of care model. Now, remembering that figure of 13,000 older person services beds, they will remain, and all beds will remain, an aspiration if the nursing and midwifery staffing workforce is currently being savagely cut and raged at, only for the defence, and they are the defender of the safety and welfare of patients. This union again have stepped in to the fore. Unfair metrics levied at us, who are keeping all of these debates alive, this union. On this slide, this man has created millions, and I just want you to read what's on it. And I know that in an awful lot of reports over the last couple of days, patients were secondary to the process, but they should be in there along with nurses and midwives. And if the worker is not looked after, the system falls apart. I would have to agree that they are very wise words indeed. In March last year, the funded workforce plan, and I'll go back, would see that nursing and midwifery numbers would grow to 1,224, which you mentioned today, Minister. Our members voted. They endorsed the recommendation of the National Executive. You yourself, Minister, announced it at last year's INMO's conference. You took the unprecedented step to ensure the implementation of the agreed workforce plan, utilised a Section 10 Ministerial Order of the Health Act 2004, for which the HSE are responsible and accountable to present quarterly reports to the Oireachtas. I am delighted that you are going to enforce the open disclosure. I would go that step further in introducing duty of candour legislation for all management within the system. Governance of this agreement rests with the National Oversight Group, which comprises of all key stakeholders, the government, the staff side, the union side, and this ensures that what is reported is accurate and reflective, fact not fiction, of the realities. I do worry at times that there is always the tendency to concentrate on the new entrants. There is that issue with regards to the retention side. Is enough being done for our very experienced, capable and competent nurses and midwives who have been in the system over the last 20, 30, 10 years? All along the nursing and midwifery continuum, we have burnout. They are underpaid, they are undervalued, and they have just simply had enough. I am not saying that this is the evidence. I am not saying it. This is the evidence from the framework for the safe staffing of nursing and midwifery and skill mix in our areas. The importance of workforce cannot be underestimated, and the focus of developing an integrated care model must include the development of an integrated, funded workforce plan. The rollout of the task force would make the HSE, dare I say it, a magnet employer in tandem and only in tandem with pay parity. The task force is that piece of the jigsaw that will ameliorate and make the nursing care environment safe for all, as it is the tool that determines the numbers scientifically and does not rely on the historical staffing complements. However, and this is my caution, it does not give us the nursing and midwifery complement that we need on the ground. We must recruit and we must retain them. Minister, I welcome your commitment today to the task force. However, know this: I put political promises in the same category as political patches. Some may be used and be quite effective. The patch solutions to our health service over the last decade are now a bandage, which is, as we know, unravelling as I speak. Therefore, Minister, it is essential, given that when we saw from Beaumont today that the mortality rate decreased by 50% over a 3-month period, it is essential that funding is set aside to facilitate the introduction of the systematic approach to determining safe staffing and midwifery levels to our 260 medical and surgical wards in the public health service. The research that was conducted by Professor Drennan shows that outcomes are positive, and he recommends, indeed, the implementation of the workforce planning and workload management system. Currently, nurses and midwives are running and crawling instead of, and here's the little nod to you two again, instead of scaling city walls, they are climbing in and out through trolleys, in EDs and in inappropriate places, up wards and units, the length and breadth of this country. Utilising nurses and midwives, and I don't single them out by giving them any priority, but these seem to be the pupils that are Danach in the system, Cork, Limerick, South Tipperary and Galway as an example. But can I add that the nurses and midwives in those hospitals must now be Olympic medalists in the discipline of hurdling. Setting the funny side there that I made aside, it is an appalling health and safety vista for nurses and midwives and patients alike. Yet this is despite our own evidence of the task force, Aiken et al., the NICE guidelines, which are specific and relating to avoiding unsafe patient-to-nurse ratios. The guidelines advise of the known risk of patient harm associated with one nurse caring for more than 8 patients on day shift. Minister, nursing and midwifery staffing must remain central to integrated care model. The work of the Staffing Task Force must be enhanced and broadened to develop a system-wide, evidence-based approach to safe nurse staffing, which will meet the challenges and opportunities, which again you said today with regards to change, that integration of care will bring. The governance of these outcomes of the research must solely lie with nurses and midwives and not non-clinical employees. My warning is this: not having evidence-based nurse-midwifery patient ratios will result in chaotic care decisions, and for me, it is akin to having no rules of the road. And can you imagine, given the current motor industry innovations, the carnage that would ensue as a result of no speed limits? Yet there is no issue with having nursing and midwifery ratios that are unsafe. The key: this union awaits the findings of the Public Service Pay Commission to open that all-secure bank to pay that Minister Donoghue holds in the Department of Public and Equality Affairs. This union presented a comprehensive written submission citing international evidence to support recruitment and retention issues in nursing and midwifery. All grades of nursing and midwifery, as I said earlier, are affected by recruitment and retention. In 2016, there was a shortfall of 3,148. Yet, amazingly, supervisor grades increased between December 2015 and September 2017 by 25.7%. We now know that even with the best efforts of the HSE, at the beginning of September 2017, the increase in the WTE nursing number was a mere 13. Ireland is the least competitive country from a purchasing power parity perspective, based on nurse earning across those English-speaking countries, the UK I have already mentioned, the USA, Canada and Australia, who are, as we speak, actively fishing across the various ponds of water for our pools of nurses and midwives. Inferior pay scales up to the 5th point of the scale when compared to healthcare assistants. At the maximum of the salary scale, the differential with other allied healthcare professionals is greater than €7,000. Our graduates and the INMO student survey conducted in April of this year and had been previously conducted in April of 2017, the findings are stark. Only 18% have been offered contracts by the HSE. However, almost 57% of respondents have been approached by overseas nursing companies, and a staggering 71% are considering emigrating. With pay, staffing levels and working conditions also given, and further education and career prospects are all cited as reasons for emigrating. Dare I say it, and I am not one of this category, but one of the latter one that I will mention. Nurses and midwives in the HSE are not getting any younger. 65% of us are over the age of 40, and 9,000 of us, where I sit, are over the age of 50. Yet, despite our detailed submission, the INMO have raised concerns, and we debated an emergency motion yesterday pertaining to the use of a questionnaire issued by the Commission without consultation with this union to determine recruitment and retention issues in nursing and midwifery. There were 44 questions, with amazingly one specifying and looking at pay. Surely, if the research topic, which most nurses in this room have conducted research for their various diplomas, degrees, masters and PhDs, that the variable would feature more frequently than in one question. Whether the Public Service Pay Commission links the recruitment and retention issues of nursing to pay, then there is job of work to be done, and we will be accepting of their acknowledgement of the issue of pay. However, if they do not, and I fix the glasses on the bridge of the nose, then Houston, there is a problem, and there is going to be an inevitable collision course. I will conclude, as I'm sure, but I know you're all nurses, and those little breaks you never get, so that's why your attention span is so good. I conclude by simply stating that until the pay of the nurse and the midwife is significantly improved, the recruitment and retention problem will continue. It was interesting that just last week, when Mr. John Moran, the former General Secretary to the Department of Finance, spoke at Engineers Ireland conference, he had the following to say, which was indeed a U-turn to his many previous utterances, and again gave a little nod and a wink to the tipping point of inequality that Roisin Shortall and Professor Josephine Hegarty referred to today. Mr. Moran stated, and I quote, that Ireland has not faced up to the challenges of success in the correct manner. He went on to say, unbelievably for Mr. Moran, think about it. The nurse who bought a house in Dublin 40 years ago, close to one of the city hospitals, compare this proposition of that nurse to one of her children. The same nurse, the same job. Do you have, or does he or she have, the same opportunity in a country which has been extremely successful? And I quote, he added, they won't be able to live in that same house. Finally, the anthem of the civil rights movement in 60s America was, we shall overcome. In referencing this phrase, as your president, I am saying that we will succeed. What an achievement this would be for our centenary celebrations. No government, and I mean no government, wants to be accredited with having failed its nurses and midwives, and as a consequence, having failed the health of the citizens of this country, if it does not resolve the recruitment and retention crisis, given that the answer lies simply in that one three-lettered word called pay. So I will say this to our employer, the department and the politicians: for once, just do the right thing. Or indeed, I alluded to the acts of hope and faith and charity earlier, but their acts will be those of the acts of sorrow and contrition, which surely will be their favourite prayers. For this President, what will I bring to the table? Passion, experience, courage, determination, tenacity, and above all, I have nothing to lose and I have everything to gain for all of you. For this union, for this union's part, impossible is nothing. It is the ultimate nursing and midwifery industrial relations machine that will do what it must. For this generation of nurse and midwife, you, the member, you all have singular stories which we have heard over the course of the last 3 days. But your destiny, and remember this, your destiny is all shared, and that is pay, which will be obtained. The wait is over, our time has come. No more promises and platitudes, as a new dawn of leadership with the Duchess of Dingle and the dictator from Donegal has arrived. And I couldn't let it pass because this day is the 4th of May, and it is well known as Star Wars Day. So may the Force be with us all as nurses and midwives. It is now or never. This is the watershed for pay. And my final slide here today is poignant. I did allude to it earlier in a particular song. It was released in 1987, the self-same year that I emigrated to England for 4 years. It was part of an album of the Joshua Tree by that infamous band U2. I could have chosen another one, With or Without You, but I thought this one was slightly better. The 4 boys featured, unbeknown to Dave, he featured it in our quiz: Bono, The Edge, Adam Clayton and Larry Mullen. When you watch this, you will see how young they are. But again, I want to remind you all that that's exactly how long all of us have been waiting on pay. In fact, we could probably go back further because they've just released old reels of the President, Cosgrove, back I think in 1914 or 1923. So we're probably waiting that length of time and longer. I didn't go for pop or war, or maybe what might have suited me was unforgettable fire. We've had a lot of rattle and hum over the last number of years, but again, pride in what we do would have also been a suitable album. Vertigo is where I've been sent at times, and dizzy at listening to the various platitudes and all of the same speak and the narrative, which is reeled over and over and over again. So without further ado, and thanking you all, Gora Míle Maithfidh Go Léir.